We'll start with Mr. Lloyd, who has 5 minutes. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for coming today. Seeing a definite theme in the testimony, we're seeing extremism on the rise in terms of, and this is not an exhaustive list, but anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, certainly some anti-establishment rhetoric. But what I haven't heard about is two cases that are also concerning to me. A rise in environmental extremism. One case in point is the recent attack at the Coastal GasLink site, where extensive damage was done to property and traumatizing workers on that site. And also in my own community, one of many communities last summer that endured attacks against places of worship, including the iconic St. Jean Baptiste Church in Morinville that was burned to the ground shortly after Canada Day. Just wondering if you could comment, maybe Ms. Davis, on these extremist trends, and what are you seeing in relation to these as well?
Yeah, I think that the Coastal GasLink example in particular is troubling, mostly because it did rise to quite a bit of property destruction and potentially some injuries to individuals involved. I think one of the issues that we face in Canada writ large across the sort of terrorism and extremist landscape is a lack of application of our laws evenly across the ideological spectrum. And this, in the IMVE space, has led to a certain sense of impunity for some of those actors. So in terms of resolution to this issue, I think that we do need to encourage resources and investigative resources, particularly, to be applying our laws across that political spectrum.
Thank you. Actually, you raised a really important point, sense of impunity. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that, because, in a lot of these, particularly, in the Coastal GasLink example and with the church burning example, a lot of the suspects or the perpetrators still haven't been caught or tried. I did do some research, and there have been a couple of perpetrators who have been placed on house arrest, and their charges and trials are still ongoing. But I wonder if you can elaborate on this sense of impunity idea you raised.
I think this, to a certain extent, relates to Mr. McGregor's question about the police officers, particularly, who were donating to the convoy. I think in the IMVE space, there's been a real sense that a lot of these actors can get away with it, in particular because there is, to a certain extent, some radicalization in police and the military. So it creates a sense that they're not going to face any consequences. And I think this is true for those police officers who donated to the convoy. And I think it might be true across in some other aspects of political violence in Canada. We've been very focused on the jihadist threat for a very long time. I think we're starting to see some broadening out amongst our law enforcement and security services to address other types of threats, but I'm not sure that we're where we need to be yet.
I appreciate that. Something that really struck me about your testimony and Mr. Sheikh's testimony is we seem, we're not there yet, but we seem as a country to become very adept at disrupting organized groups. And I think that's why we're seeing more of these sort of lone wolf attacks. And I'm not sure if, in the church burning cases, that this was an organized thing. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that. But maybe you could comment on, when we're seeing these lone wolf attacks, these people aren't just coming out of nowhere. They're being sort of developed in an environment. And I'm wondering, if you could comment on the environmental aspects of, not in terms of the environment, but in terms of the political environment that they're rising out of. Thank you.
Yeah, this relates very much to the way I see the IMVE threat in Canada and globally. I don't see it as really focused on groups. I see it much more as loose movements, a set of ideologies. And I think this actually applies to both maybe IMVE, across that political spectrum for IMVE actors, so depending on whatever it is they're attacking. So we tend to not see those organizational structures. This impacts our ability to investigate those actors. I prefer the term lone actor because lone wolf tends to glorify a little bit the actors themselves. But without that structure, it does make it more difficult to combat the threat. Not impossible. There's been really important work done by particularly my former organization, CSIS, on indicators of mobilization to violence, but it is an ongoing challenge.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to Ms.